Good morning, good morning. So glad to be here. My name is RevTamara, and I get to speak about vulnerability today. And Elijah has so eloquently been speaking about it, and so beautifully also. Right now, I invite you to do something that I have been practicing in my own life, and that is to begin the sermon with an intention from you. Your individualized intention of what you want to walk away with today, what feeling, what experience that you want to carry from the music, the beautiful music and the message. So I'm going to have us close our eyes for about 20 seconds and then start 3 deep breaths, and then we'll begin. So hold an intention of whatever it is that you want to experience or feel. Let us begin. Let's breathe in, hold, and release. Breathe in, hold, and release. Breathe in, hold, and release. Thank you. So I'm going to take my shoes off. I feel like I need to be grounded more. So when I went to look up Webster's dictionary of the definition of vulnerability, it was depressing. I was like, this isn't inspirational. And the word vulnerable comes from the Latin root vulnus, and vulnus means wound in Latin. I was like, ow. So it goes on to say that being vulnerable, especially if you're older, ow, or younger, ow, and in a position where you can be harmed. And it goes on, and I said, well, this isn't the spiritual vulnerability I was really looking for. So I went on. And what I realized is that with every good, beautiful word in the English language, in the Chinese language, in each language, when it comes to spirituality, it's always a paradox. And that's the beauty, because vulnerability is something you have to have courage. It's risk, and you cannot have or take risk without courage. So therefore, it's a strength. It opens us up to intimacy. It opens us up to experience levels of trust that cannot be done when we are armored up and don't want to be hurt. I know for myself there have been years, decades, where after intimate relationships, I was just like, that's it. Not going to go there again. And what I know for sure is I'm not going to regret the things I did do in life, but those things that I didn't have the courage, the emotional courage to take on, to say that thing I really wanted to say, but I didn't want to be embarrassed, to do the things I really wanted to do, but maybe I wouldn't be good at it. And therefore, the shame comes. So to avoid shame, to avoid being wounded, many of us build up walls. Especially when it comes to something or someone that's harmed us. And we feel, that's not going to happen again. That old saying, shame me once, shame on you, shame me twice, shame on me. But there's something bigger, because the mind, I'm learning so much about the mind. We're the science of mind. So my whole life growing up, I was the youngest, and my brothers and sisters were really, really smart. I mean, I think my brother got one of the highest scores of the SAT in science and math. I barely made it through algebra. Thank you for God, because that's the only way I did it. But what has been coming to me with vulnerability is that as I was reading a book that someone gave me last Sunday in the social hall, and it was called Dying to Be Me by Anita Moorjani. And she was a Hindi woman who grew up in Hong Kong. And so she grew up in the Chinese culture, and she went to American Christian schools. So she got Krishna, Buddha, and Jesus all wrapped in a roll, you know? But it left her confused about which way to go. As she got older, she rebelled, like many of us do, and she did not accept the arranged marriage that was for her, and she put shame on her family. And she went to college. She did meet the love of her life. And then many years later, her best friend died of cancer. People around her, her father passed away of cancer. And so she was very afraid of getting sick. She was in a lot of pain. And then she got cancer. And she went to India to do Ayurvedic medicine. She went to Chinese herbal medicine. She did all the modalities, Western medicine. But after 4 years of fighting the battle with cancer, she was given a few hours to live in the hospital. She was on a ventilator, everything. She had a near-death experience. How many people have heard about near-death experience? I'm sure all of us have, somewhere. And when she had that experience, it was so impactful, and she chose to come back. And when she came back into her body, she chose that it would no longer have cancer. It's one of the most documented, most documented cases of someone having a miraculous remission, from cancer. So when she came back in, her organs literally had hours left. They were all shutting down. And then she came back. And within 2 weeks, she had no cancer in her body, and they were doing all kinds of horrible tests trying to figure out why she didn't have cancer. It's like that acceptance of our mind, right? So the book's about her life, then her experience of being ill, then her experience of the near death, and then she writes about coming back into the world. But some of the things she said were so powerful I wanted to share, and it reminded me of what the difference is between knowing and knowledge, between the mind and the soul. And she says the mind is a place where we collect information and our emotions go through it, but our soul is a place where our intuition and our instinct is. And I've said this before on stage. Our mind has a lot to do with things we're going to do to keep this beautiful human body going. So the mind gets to judge, it gets to compare, it gets to evaluate, it gets all these things. And it's all about doing. Where the soul is trying to reach out to us in beingness. And she put on this beautiful dress one day and was sitting down having tea. And it came to her how she was going to talk to people about her experience in the near death. And she said, when I was there, it was unconditional love, beautiful colors and music, and there was no separation. The whole idea of oneness, which we talk about. But she said, Krishna wasn't there, Jesus wasn't there, Buddha wasn't there. That there were no religions there. but just a sense of love, of unconditional love. And this is how she explained something that blew my mind. She said, God is not a being. God is a state of being. And I was a part of that state of being. There was no separation in the state of being between me, God, and everything around me. There was no time and space, no space and time. It was all done through this incredible feeling. And I thought about how many times we harm ourselves through our thoughts. Thoughts of shame, thoughts we create. And I heard this from Brene Brown, and I was like, my heart just stopped. She said, vulnerability. She said, what I wish for people is to embrace their vulnerability, because if you're brave enough to search and to discover your darkness, it will lead you to immense, immense love and light within yourself. And I think that's where we get so confused about trying to control our lives, trying to make things happen and become extremely disappointed. Because when we try to do that from the physicality part of the world, it's very limited. When we do it from a place and space of intuition, of instinct, of mystery, that paradox, you know, vulnerability means you're risking to be wounded. Vulnerability as a paradox also means you're opening up your heart to the most deepest connections you will ever experience in your life. Right? So, spiritually, it's a powerful word. Anita Moorjani goes on to say that what she learned is not trying to make things happen, but to allow things to happen. And I think in our spiritual path, that feels right to me. It feels right to me to allow life to happen. We still go within our mind, like, I know that in Buddhism they talk about your true nature within, and they talk about the mind being the part where we have, like an ox, where you have to make sure that you take it to the right places so it aligns with your spirit. So it aligns with things that have great meaning for us. When darkness comes, most of us run because we've been taught that it's painful. But in the deepest, darkest recesses of who we are, most of the time, pain gets us to vulnerability really quickly. You know? It doesn't mess around. There's another word, bleeping, but it doesn't mess around. So sometimes the most painful things in our life bring us to our knees. They bring us to the knees because I think it makes us stop to hear the true voice within us, to hear the true knowing. Not the intellectual knowledge, but the knowing. I've been doing some hospice work the last several months with a very close friend of mine. We were in 6th grade homeroom class together, and and we dated in the 90s, and we were really in and out of each other's lives. And he called me this fall, and we had been getting together a couple times a month, and he said, Tam, I feel really sick, and I'm here alone, and I think I need to go to the hospital. So I took him from Monterey to San Jose. He's in Kaiser, and he had pancreatitis. And then a few weeks later, he came back and he took me to lunch. He said, Tam, I have pancreatic cancer. It was a devastating, blow. And he said, but it's stage 2. They think they can get the tumor out. I'm going to start chemo. So I joined him on that journey with his other friends. And then in January 6th, he called to tell me that it had spread everywhere. They weren't going to do the surgery. And he just shared about what that felt like. And then a few weeks ago, as I was sitting in the house, he had to give his keys up to his truck because he couldn't drive anymore. He was giving away all his stuff. And we were going through all the businesses of turning off the cable and doing that. He was going into, my last name is called Merrill's Gardens in Monterey. And because he was getting weaker. So he was in there for about a week. And I saw him a few times, and we were talking. And then I didn't hear from him. I didn't hear a text, and I got worried. So I didn't know his brother as well, but I called his brother, and I told his brother who I was, and I said, I'm Tamara Merrill. They know me by Tammy growing up. And he goes, oh, Tammy, I've heard about you for decades. I was like, oh, good. And I said, I hope it was good. He didn't say anything. So I was like, I don't think I'll go any further on that one. John is a devout Christian. He wasn't always. And we had these great talks about religion when he wasn't religious. And when I was a vegetarian and he wasn't, he'd be eating a steak and I'd be eating my salad, and he'd go, ow, ow. And I'm like, what's wrong? He goes, I heard the salad screaming. And, and so now they do know that plants do speak. But we always were able to have these fascinating conversations that crossed over, like Anita Morjani said. It crossed over whether you believe in Jesus or Buddha or Krishna or Muhammad. It was about essence. It was about love. And so, as his brother said, Tam, he's fading. You got to go see him. So I went to see him, my son and I, Doug. And I went to see him, and I had all these things I wanted to say that I thought I never said to him. And you know, when you get there, all you want to know and all you want to say is, I love you. That's all you want to say. That's it. I love you. How much of our lives do we miss that opportunity in each moment to be the spiritual warrior, to be vulnerable, to be brave, to be courageous, and tell people, I love you. You matter. I forgive you. I'm sorry. It's the most powerful thing in the world for this life experience, for your children, your spouse, whomever, your friends. And we always say that we forget it, but it's so true. And I'm going to end right now with, I couldn't memorize it very well, so I'm going to read it. But it's from Irving Williams. And he wrote the books, Rumpelstiltskin and Sleepy Hollow. And he wrote about men crying and being vulnerable with tears and people being vulnerable with tears. And I thought it was so powerful, so I'd like to read that before I go into prayer. Tears. There is a sacredness in tears. It is not a mark of weakness, but of power. Tears speak more eloquently than 10,000 tongues. Tears are the messengers of overwhelming grief, of deep contrition, and tears speak of unspeakable love. Let us be vulnerable with our tears, with our heart, with our mind, in alignment of knowing that we're here each moment to express our vulnerability, our spirituality, through our heart, and through knowing we are always safe. Let us go into prayer. I know that there is only one power and one presence, one oneness in life, where we're all connected at a very deep level. Our hearts and our minds are surrounded by mystery, by paradoxes that seem confusing, that don't give us the answer, because the answer is already found when we sit quietly in the silence and listen to that intuition, that instinct, that we are more than we can imagine, that we are born by design. We have no merits to get, nothing to overcome, no shame or regret, but we're living life one breath at a time with this intense wonder of how to connect and reach deeper into each experience we have. A flower, a dog, an ant, a bee, and you and I. What magic lies before us, and being vulnerable and taking that chance to be brave and daring and courageous, to say from kindness and compassion, who are you? What are you about? Finding the joy between someone or in something. That is the mark of a great life. One that has been enriched by every point of every experience, from the sweet to the bittersweet, transforming all things into remembering who you are, who I am, and rejoicing and living by that knowing. So as you move forward in this world today, out in your world, let us be vulnerable. Let us open our hearts and see where the magic will take us. So I release my word into the universe, knowing it is done, and so it is.